My name is Rita Williams, and I'm 27 years old. If you looked at my life from the outside, you would probably assume I had everything under control. I built my own contracting business from nothing at 22, reinvested every dollar, learned from every mistake, and slowly carved out a life grounded in stability and discipline. I own my home outright, keep my finances organized, live well below my means, and avoid the kind of drama that usually comes from mixing emotions with money. I've never been flashy. I've never needed to be. What I have, I earned the hard way. I thought I'd chosen a partner who saw the value in that. Andrew Carter, 29, felt like a breath of calm when I first met him. Soft-spoken, attentive, affectionate in a way that felt warm but not overwhelming. We'd been together 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and the wedding was set for 8 weeks away. Andrew was the kind of man people described as sweet, supportive, and easy to love. I believed he was exactly that. I believed a lot of things back then. This summer, he invited me to his family's enormous annual reunion, more than 60 relatives spread across a rented property with cabins, a giant lawn, and the sort of setup that looked like it belonged in a movie. I was nervous. I don't come from a big family myself, but I wanted to know the people who raised the man I planned to marry. From the moment we arrived, his older sister Melanie seemed fascinated by me. She was polished and confident with the kind of smile that felt friendly but observant. She asked countless questions: how I built my business, how much work it involved, how long I'd owned my house, what exactly my grandfather had left me, what types of investments I preferred. I chalked it up to curiosity. Families are nosy sometimes. It didn't feel malicious then. That first day went smoothly. Andrew's parents were warm enough, his cousins were lively, and he made a point to stay close to me, touching my back lightly, checking if I was comfortable introducing me proudly to everyone. That night, most of the family gathered outdoors around a massive bonfire surrounded by camp chairs and lanterns. It was the kind of cozy, soft-lit chaos that should have made me feel like I was becoming part of something bigger. Around 9, Andrew asked if I could grab more drinks from the kitchen. I said sure and headed inside. The house felt strangely quiet, the kind of stillness that made my footsteps sound too loud. I grabbed a case of beer from the fridge, nudged the door shut with my hip, and started toward the hallway, only to stop when I heard voices drifting from around the corner. Andrew's voice, and Melanie's. I didn't mean to listen. I didn't even move at first. But something about Melanie's tone, low, conspiratorial, made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't explain. "It's even better than we thought," she said. "Did you hear her talking about the property portfolio and that trust her grandfather left her? And the commercial buildings she mentioned? Rita's assets are ridiculous." My heart slammed painfully against my ribs. Andrew answered, "Yeah. And her house is fully paid off. No mortgage. Plus her business equity. She's sitting on way more than she lets on." Melanie gave a soft, amused laugh. "Just a few more months, Andrew, and you'll have access to everything. You just have to get through the wedding." I blinked hard, gripping the case of beer so tightly the cardboard bent under my fingers. "She's so trusting." "It's almost sad," Melanie murmured. "These emotional types never protect themselves. Too romantic, too eager to build a future. She won't ask for a prenup." Andrew responded with a laugh that felt like a punch to my chest. "Exactly. And once we're married, well, divorce settlements are generous. By the time she realizes what's happening, I'll already have what I need." I realized I wasn't breathing. My entire body went cold numb from the shock of hearing such calculated cruelty in Andrew's voice. Andrew, the man who kissed my forehead every morning, who told me I was his safe place, who held my hand like it meant something deeper than convenience. Melanie asked softly. "She has no idea you're not planning to stick around, right?" "None," Andrew said. "She keeps talking about our future, about kids, our dream house, all the things she wants us to build together. She's so in love, it's almost pathetic." I backed away as quietly as I could, hands shaking uncontrollably. I set the beer down on the counter, afraid the sound of the cardboard might betray me. Then I walked out to the bonfire and somehow managed to slip seamlessly into the noise and warmth, as if nothing inside me had violently collapsed. When Andrew returned a minute later, he kissed my cheek. For a moment, I genuinely thought I might pass out from the sheer force of pretending I didn't know. "Your family's amazing," I told him with a smile that didn't so much as quiver. "I'm so lucky to be joining them." He smiled back, "Yeah, lucky." The drive home the next day was excruciating. Andrew talked nonstop about wedding details, flowers, color palettes, seating charts. Honeymoon plans, like he was painting me a beautiful future he already planned to abandon. I kept my responses light, neutral, perfectly calm. Meanwhile, inside, something quiet and steely had taken root. When we got home and he kissed me goodbye, telling me he'd call later, my entire expression dropped the second his car pulled away. I stood in my kitchen staring at the empty countertop where that case of beer had briefly sat the night before. My heartbeat steadied, my mind sharpened, and the shock transformed into something focused and deliberate. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Rita, he answered immediately. Is everything all right? No, I said. I need an ironclad prenup, and I need it fast. There was a pause. Tell me what happened. So I did, every word, every whisper I heard in that hallway. By the time we ended the call, the decision was made. 1 week before the wedding, I would hand Andrew the contract he never expected and give him a choice he never thought he'd have to make. And for the first time since that bonfire, I felt the faintest sense of control returning to my chest. The morning after the reunion, I woke with the kind of headache that comes from emotional shock, more than lack of sleep. Andrew had already sent me a sweet good morning text, complete with a heart emoji, as if nothing in his world had changed. I stared at the message for several seconds before placing my phone face down on the table. Everything about him suddenly felt foreign, his tone, his affection, his familiar patterns. None of it meant what I used to think it did. My lawyer, Daniel Brooks, worked quickly. He'd handled my business contracts for years and knew how seriously I took protection and structure. When I told him what I overheard, his entire tone shifted into something controlled and strategic. Within a week, he had drafted a prenup that protected every part of my premarital life, the house I'd owned, long before Andrew, the business I built from nothing, the investments I'd grown through careful planning, and the trust I inherited from my grandfather money. He had passed down specifically so his grandchildren could avoid the financial traps he had once fallen into. The prenup detailed exactly what would happen in case of divorce. My premarital assets remained mine. Any marital assets would be split proportionally based on actual contribution, and if the marriage lasted less than 5 years, the division would be minimal. In other words, it was entirely fair unless someone was marrying me for the wrong reasons. All week, while Daniel finalized the document, I watched Andrew closely. It became painfully obvious how much I had ignored before. He was suddenly glued to his phone, texting nonstop, especially with Melanie. Conversations turned into quick whispers the second I walked into the room. He'd tilt the screen away from me so subtly that a less alert person might not notice. At night, he'd step into the hallway for work calls that lasted 15 minutes longer than they ever had. Twice I caught him browsing luxury condos online, $4,000 a month places downtown, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows and concierge service. Just daydreaming, he had said when I walked past him. I'd forced a smile. Sure. By the end of the week, I was done daydreaming, too done pretending everything was fine. I invited Andrew over for a quiet dinner. Nothing fancy. Just the two of us, candles lit. Soft music playing. I cooked, set the table neatly, and kept my face perfectly calm. Andrew was cheerful, almost unusually so. He went on and on about last-minute wedding details, the photographer he wanted. The seating chart debates the idea of adding a sparkler exit. Isn't it exciting? He said happily as he ate. We're so close. Very close, I replied, and it almost startled me how steady my voice sounded. I waited until after we finished eating. I cleared the plates, refilled his water, made sure he was relaxed before sitting down across from him. Then I placed the prenup on the table, sliding the folder toward him with quiet finality. He blinked. What's this? A prenuptial agreement, I said. I need you to review it and sign before the wedding. Andrew's face didn't fall at first. It froze. The way someone's expression goes completely still when they've been hit with something they didn't prepare for. His eyes flicked from the folder to me, searching my expression, maybe hoping for some sign of hesitation. He found none. You're seriously giving me a prenup? A week before the wedding, he asked slowly. Yes. Why? His voice sharpened, but he tried to bury the edge beneath a thin veneer of wounded confusion. Don't you trust me? I kept my gaze level. It's standard for anyone with premarital assets. This protects what we each bring into the marriage. He opened the folder with stiff hands and began reading. The further down the page he got, the paler he became. By page 3, he wasn't even pretending to mask his reaction anymore. This says I get nothing if we divorce in the first 5 years. That's correct. And the house stays yours always. Yes, I owned it 8 years before we met. And your business stays separate. I built it from the ground up. It remains mine. And the trust fund is protected, he said, voice rising. Rita, this is extreme. I thought we were a team. We are a team, I said calmly. And teams don't steal from each other. It was subtle, but the moment the words left my lips, his entire demeanor changed. The mask he had been wearing, soft, confused, wounded, slipped. His jaw tensed, his shoulders stiffened, and a flash of anger crossed his eyes before he smoothed it over. I can't believe you're doing this now. This feels like a betrayal. It's smart, I corrected. It keeps what we each built safe. I haven't built anything. He snapped suddenly louder than I expected. I make $42,000 a year. You make more than that in a quarter. How is this fair? Then build something, I said evenly. We have our whole future ahead of us. Contribute financially, and you'll be protected. This just keeps our premarital lives separate. Andrew pushed back from the table abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor. I thought you loved me. This makes me feel like you think I'm a gold digger. Are you? I asked softly. I let the question hang there. He stared at me furious and stunned. How dare you? Then sign it, I said quietly. If you're marrying me for love, this shouldn't matter. He grabbed his phone and stormed into the bedroom. His voice immediately turned frantic behind the closed door, clearly talking to someone. Melanie, probably. Or his mother. Maybe both. I didn't bother trying to decipher every word. I didn't need to. 20 minutes later, he returned to the kitchen with red, angry eyes and a trembling jaw. I'm not signing this. Then there's no wedding. His mouth fell open. You're bluffing. Try me. You already paid for everything, the venue, the catering, the band. You'll lose all of it. I'd rather lose $20,000 than half my life's work. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe the woman he thought I was would have begged, apologized, compromised, folded herself into the shape of whatever kept him comfortable. But that woman was gone. I need to talk to my family, he finally said. Take all the time you need. The wedding is in 7 days. Speak with a lawyer if you want. We can discuss modifications if they're reasonable, but the core protections stay. He left that night. Didn't come back. Didn't call. By the next morning, his family had mobilized. I didn't even get a chance to drink my coffee before my phone lit up with the first call. His mother, then his father, then Melanie. And all of them had one message: remove the prenup or you'll lose him. They had no idea just how much I'd already lost and how much I was finally starting to save. The pressure campaign began faster than I expected. Before noon, on the day after Andrew stormed out, I heard a knock at my door. Sharp and patient, the kind that announces itself instead of requesting entry. When I opened it, Melanie was already walking inside without so much as a greeting. Behind her were Andrew's parents, Diana and Richard, and a man I didn't recognize at first glance, thin, stiff posture and expensive briefcase. A lawyer, not mine. They arranged themselves around my kitchen table like they were staging an intervention, though their expressions were far less concerned and far more self-righteous. I kept my posture relaxed, my face neutral, waiting for someone to explain why they had shown up uninvited. Melanie spoke first, arms crossed. We need to talk about this prenup nonsense. I almost laughed at the word nonsense, but instead I gestured for them to sit. I didn't bother offering coffee. They weren't here to have a conversation, they were here to apply pressure. The lawyer, apparently someone Melanie knew through work, slid a folder toward me. Rita, after reviewing your proposed prenuptial agreement, my client is willing to sign a modified version that's more equitable. I opened the folder. Inside was a neatly typed document that initially looked similar to mine until I started reading. Their version was a masterpiece of entitlement disguised as compromise. According to their edits, my house would become joint property the moment the marriage license was signed. My business would be considered a marital asset because Andrew had provided emotional support during its operation, and the trust fund my grandfather protected for decades would be shared equally because Andrew was joining the family. I closed the folder calmly and pushed it back across the table. Absolutely not. Diana immediately began to tear up, leaning forward as if her heartbreak alone could undo my decision. Rita, she whispered, Andrew is devastated. He feels blindsided. This is humiliating for him, for all of us. A marriage should be built on trust and unity. Trust requires honesty, I replied, and I'm the only one at this table demonstrating it. Her tears intensified, dripping dramatically onto the table. You're destroying the wedding. You're destroying his dreams. That's strange, I said, because according to that document, the only dream here is access to my assets. Richard's face reddened. You think our son is using you after everything he's given you? Given me, I repeated with a small, incredulous laugh. Given me what? His time, his presence. He didn't pay for a single part of this wedding. He doesn't contribute to bills, and he hasn't shown the slightest interest in building anything together financially. Meanwhile, your daughter here, I nodded, toward Melanie, spent the reunion discussing exactly how profitable my assets are. Melanie glared at me. You misheard. I didn't. The lawyer attempted to regain control. With all due respect, Rita agreements like yours undermine the foundation of marriage. They create imbalance and distrust. What undermines marriage, I said evenly, is a plan to divorce for profit. And you can tell your clients this, the prenup stays as written. They are welcome to seek modifications, but the premarital protections remain. Melanie scoffed. There won't be a wedding if you keep this up. Then there won't be a wedding, I replied. That silenced them more effectively than anything else I could have said. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of my refrigerator. Then slowly they gathered their papers, their indignation, and their belief that intimidation should work on me. They left without another word. When the door closed behind them, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. But the quiet didn't last. Later that afternoon, my business phone rang with a client, sounding uneasy. Rita, we're hearing you're going through some complications. Someone said you might not be able to fulfill upcoming contracts. My stomach twisted. Within the hour, 4 more clients called with similar messages. Something was off. I cross-checked numbers, traced call logs, and found one pattern. All of the calls had originated from a single office phone, a number belonging to Melanie's workplace. I didn't bother calling her directly. I emailed her instead, short and controlled. If you contact any of my clients again, I will pursue legal action. This is your only warning. She didn't reply, but she stopped. Andrew, on the other hand, tried a different tactic. That evening, he arrived at my house without warning. No anger, no dramatics, just soft eyes and a trembling voice. Rita, can we talk? He asked, standing in my doorway like a man who had rehearsed the role of remorse. I let him in. I wasn't afraid of him. I was simply done being manipulated. He paced around my living room like he was preparing to confess something painful. I shouldn't have reacted that way, he said gently. The prenup scared me. I wasn't expecting it. It just felt like you didn't trust me. It's not about trust, I said. It's about fairness. He nodded quickly, trying to appear understanding. I know. I get it. I just thought maybe we could make a few adjustments, just small ones, like the 5-year part. Could we lower it, maybe to 2? And the business valuation seems... No. He blinked. What do you mean? I mean no modifications. The prenup is fair. Sign it as is, or we're done. His face finally cracked. The mask fell away, revealing the anger simmering beneath his practiced sorrow. Why are you being so cold? He demanded. Where is the woman I fell in love with? She woke up, I said quietly. That's all. His expression hardened. If you think you can just walk away. I'm not walking anywhere, I said. You are, unless you sign. Andrew left that night without another word, but the retaliation began almost immediately. The next morning, I received an email from a wedding venue coordinator saying they had gotten a call from me canceling the event. Luckily, they found the tone suspicious and called to confirm. That same day, Andrew's social media filled with vague posts about betrayal, heartbreak, and being abandoned by the person who promised forever. The comments flooded in friends coddling him, acquaintances sympathizing, strangers offering comfort. He cultivated the narrative with the precision of someone who had done this before. I didn't respond. I didn't correct anyone. Silence, I realized, is sometimes the loudest truth. That night, the situation escalated again. I received a fraud alert from my bank. Someone tried to access my account with outdated security information. The attempt failed, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. When I called Andrew, he didn't pick up. But an hour later, I received something else flashing lights outside my house. A police cruiser. Officers stepped onto my porch asking about a domestic dispute. Andrew apparently claimed he lived with me and that I was refusing him access to his belongings. I showed the officers my property deed, explained that Andrew had never lived here, and confirmed he had already taken every single thing he kept here earlier that week. The officers were professional patient, and once they saw the documentation, visibly annoyed at being used in someone's personal vendetta. Andrew and Melanie stood beside their car watching the scene unfold. Melanie's expression was triumph, mixed with something darker, while Andrew looked flushed with embarrassment when the officer told him plainly, "You do not live here, sir. You need to leave." After they drove away, I changed all the locks, added a full security system, and installed external cameras. I wasn't scared, but I was done being unprepared. The next morning, I woke to more than 70 missed calls and messages, some from friends, some from extended family, many from people I barely knew. Andrew had spread the story that I abandoned him at the altar, even though the wedding was still days away. It didn't matter. The truth was coming. And so was the end. The avalanche of messages after Andrew's dramatic online performance was overwhelming at first, but the overwhelming part wasn't the quantity, it was the variety. Half the people who reached out seemed confused or mildly concerned. A handful scolded me, parroting whatever version Andrew had fed them. And then there were a few who asked quiet, pointed questions that told me they suspected there was more to the story than Andrew was letting on. I waited until the notifications slowed, then typed a single concise message and sent it to the people who mattered. There is no wedding. Andrew refused to sign a prenup after I overheard him discussing with Melanie how to access my assets and plan a divorce settlement. I'm willing to talk privately if you need clarification. I didn't add emotion. I didn't defend myself. I simply offered the truth. The responses came quickly. Some were stunned. Some apologized for assuming the worst. Some admitted they had sensed something off about him for months. A few sent nothing at all. Silence was its own answer. By noon, my phone rang again. It was Diana, and her voice had shifted from wounded mother to theatrical martyr. "Rita," she said, dragging my name out as if she were exhausted by the very idea of speaking to me. "How could you humiliate Andrew like this?" "He is devastated. His entire family is devastated." "I didn't humiliate him," I replied calmly. "He did that himself. You're destroying our family's reputation. He told me you blindsided him with paperwork designed to punish him." "What he didn't tell you," I said, "is that I overheard him and Melanie planning how to access my assets and benefit from a divorce. I heard them clearly at the reunion." There was a long, tight silence. Then Diana's voice sharpened. "He didn't mean it like that." "What context," I asked, "makes planning a divorce settlement before the wedding acceptable?" Another pause. "Siblings joke," she said weakly. "You're taking things too literally." "Then he should have signed the prenup," I said. "If it was a joke, he could have proved it was nothing." She snapped something under her breath, then said aloud, "You're cold. You're heartless. I don't know how anyone will ever put up with you." And she hung up. I stared at the blank screen for a moment, then set the phone down. I used to take that kind of accusation personally. Now it felt like noise, someone else choking on a problem they created. Not long after, I received a 5-page email from Andrew. 5 full pages. It was a bizarre mixture of apology, rage, guilt trips, and veiled threats, as if he had poured every possible angle of manipulation into one message. He wrote about how much he loved me, how deeply I hurt him, how I was destroying our future. Then he accused me of financial abuse. Then he begged me to reconsider. Then he hinted that he might have legal options for emotional damages if I kept ruining his reputation. I forwarded the entire thing to Daniel, who called me within 10 minutes. "Don't respond," he said. "He's spiraling. Save every message." I did exactly that. For a few days, things quieted down, just enough for me to start believing the chaos might slowly fade. But then the story took another strange turn. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard the fatigued voice of the last person I expected, Richard Andrews' father. "Rita," he said, exhaling heavily. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." I sat down. "Go ahead." Did he really say those things at the reunion? About access to your money? About a divorce settlement? "Yes," I said without hesitation. "He and Melanie both. I heard every word clearly." Richard let out a long, broken sigh. "I thought so." I frowned slightly. "Thought so." There was a rustling sound in the background like he was pacing. "Diana and we're getting divorced," he said quietly. "I found out she's been hiding money from me for years. Separate accounts, quiet withdrawals, moving things around without telling me." His voice cracked with bitter humor. "Turns out Andrew learned from the best." My chest tightened, not out of sympathy for Andrew, but for the man finally realizing his wife and children had learned exploitation like it was a family tradition. "I'm sorry," I said honestly. "Don't be," he answered. "You're smarter than I was. You saw it coming and protected yourself. I should have done the same decades ago." There was a long pause, then he added, "I'm sorry for how we pressured you. We raised him poorly. That's on us." He hung up before I could respond. For hours afterward, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head, the way Richard's voice cracked, the quiet defeat in it. The realization that dysfunction wasn't new, their entire family structure had been warped long before I arrived. The next wave of revelations wasn't any prettier. A friend of a friend sent me screenshots from Andrew's former bridesmaid group chat. Half the women defended him fervently, accusing me of being controlling or cold. The other half admitted they always thought something about him was off. One even wrote, he lied about his last relationship too. Said she was crazy. Maybe she wasn't. Then came news about Melanie. Daniel emailed me to let me know her company had reviewed the complaint I filed regarding her contacting my clients. She didn't deny the calls, but she tried to justify them as concern. The company didn't buy it. They terminated her for professional misconduct and ethics violations. Andrew, meanwhile, moved back into his childhood home, separate from Diana, separate from Richard. The whole Carter household split like a fault line, finally giving way. I didn't celebrate their collapse, but I did feel a certain bleak validation. The rot had been there long before I heard those whispers in a hallway. By the end of the week, the dust finally began to settle. The wedding date came and went. Instead of walking down an aisle, I spent the day rearranging the furniture in my living room, pushing the couch closer to the window for better light, shifting the coffee table, removing a few items that reminded me of Andrew. When I finished, I stood there quietly looking around at the space. It felt different, lighter, mine again. And for the first time since the reunion, a soft, steady sense of peace settled in my chest, a feeling I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. The week after the wedding, that never happened, felt strangely quiet, like I had stepped out of a storm into a room where the air was finally still. There were no more frantic calls from Andrew, no more guilt-drenched monologues from Diana, no more stalking attempts disguised as requests for closure. My house, for the first time in what felt like months, stayed completely silent. No footsteps, no raised voices, no background tension humming in the walls. I woke up each morning without bracing for drama, and the relief was so profound it almost startled me. In the newfound stillness, I started noticing things I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. I rearranged my bedroom, pushing the dresser to the opposite wall so the morning light hit differently. I cleared out the closet entirely, not because Andrew had left anything behind he hadn't, but because I wanted a physical reset and uncluttering of the life he tried to wedge himself into. I bought new bedding, thicker cotton sheets in a calm, muted tone, something that made the room feel clean and grounded. I even moved a few pieces of furniture in the living room, shifting the energy of the house back into something that felt like me. The quiet also gave me space to reflect on how close I'd come to losing everything, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Andrew had woven himself into my life with such soft precision that it was easy not to notice the parts he never touched, never asked about, never contributed to. I replayed moments I had pushed aside, the way he deflected every financial discussion, how he became irritated when I asked about long-term planning, the casual way he dismissed boundaries by saying things like, "We'll figure it out later," or "Why talk about money when we're happy?" I remembered the story he told early in our relationship, claiming his ex was crazy because she kept bringing up financial transparency. I had believed him back then. Now I could see the pattern clearly. These weren't isolated quirks. These were tactics. And yet, even knowing everything, I couldn't find regret in calling off the wedding. There was only relief, heavy, liberating relief. My business surprisingly didn't suffer. In fact, it thrived. 2 major contracts landed in my inbox within a week. Opportunities that would have been nearly impossible to manage if I'd been dragged into the emotional quicksand that Andrew and his family tried to pull me into. I threw myself into work with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. The focus grounded me, reminded me of what I had built, of how capable I was long before Andrew ever appeared in my life. Eventually, when the dust felt settled enough, I booked a trip to a warm coastal city. Sunlight, ocean air, long walks, unfamiliar streets. Everything about the escape felt like pressing a reset button. I ate fresh seafood at small restaurants with outdoor patios, read books on the balcony of a little beachfront rental, and forced my brain to slow down in ways it hadn't in months. One night I stood on the shoreline barefoot, letting the waves wash over my ankles, and realized that I finally felt free. Not lonely, not broken, just free. When I returned home, something unexpected happened. A friend introduced me to Lucas Merritt, a project manager for a construction company, who ironically but fittingly understood contracts planning and boundaries better than most people. Our first meeting wasn't anything grand. It was just coffee at a quiet cafe with warm lighting and comfortable chairs. He arrived early, greeted me with a steady, confident smile, and spoke in a way that felt grounded rather than performative. He had his own house, earned his own money, and didn't seem the slightest bit intimidated by the fact that I had built my life independently. At one point I mentioned casually, if I ever get serious with someone again, I'll want a prenup. Not out of suspicion, just practicality. Lucas laughed not mockingly, but with the easy humor of someone who truly understood. Good, he said. I'd want one too. I've spent years building what I have. 2 adults can agree to protect themselves without calling it distrust. It was the calmest, most refreshing reaction I could have imagined. We're not rushing anything. We're not planning a future yet. We're simply getting to know each other, coffee conversation, occasional dinners. And for now, that's enough. More than enough. The truth is, this whole ordeal taught me something. I should have known long ago, love should never demand that you gamble your safety. A real partner cares about your stability, not your assets. They want you secure, not vulnerable. They don't fear fairness. They don't resent boundaries. They don't build their future plans around your hard-earned past. Andrew wanted a shortcut. He wanted a life he didn't have to build. He wanted access instead of partnership, entitlement instead of effort, and guarantees instead of growth. Calling off the wedding wasn't just a financial decision. It was the moment I chose myself over someone else's plan for me. When I walk through my house now, the rooms feel open again. The walls don't echo with tension. I can breathe without calculating who might be manipulating what behind the scenes. I've regained not just my home, but my peace, my certainty, my confidence. Someone recently asked me if I regretted anything, if I wished I'd seen the signs earlier, or avoided the relationship entirely. I answered honestly, no. Every red flag I learned to recognize now is a form of armor I'll carry forward. Every instinct I ignored back then is sharper today. I'm wiser, stronger, more grounded in who I am and what I will never tolerate again. My grandfather left me that trust fund after living through his own brutal divorce, one that cost him nearly everything he'd built. When he rebuilt his life, he did so with a clear message: protect what you earn, because not everyone who claims to love you truly does. For a long time, I thought his caution was rooted in bitterness. Now I understand that it was rooted in wisdom. I'm not anti-love, I'm not cynical, I'm not closed off. I'm just careful, and anyone worth having in my life will respect that. If anything, this chapter proved that my instincts were right when they finally screamed loud enough for me to hear them. The prenup I had drafted is still in my safe. Maybe I'll need it someday. Maybe I won't. But I'm not afraid either way. I'm not afraid of protecting myself. I'm not afraid of saying no. I'm not afraid of walking away. For the first time in a long time,